I'm Jake Williams, this is Chasing Cars, and this little scallion behind me is the Hyundai Kona. It's Hyundai's first entrant to the small SUV market in the Western world, and they fully admit that they're late to the party. The company's Australian executives said that they wanted to spend more time observing the SUV market and better compete with cars like the Mazda CX-3 and the Toyota CHR. They've definitely made a splash because the Kona looks quite radical with a massive front and some split headlight arrangements. But we want to know what you think of the Kona styling. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Tell us below in the comments, and while you're at it, press subscribe. But overall, have Hyundai been late to the party or have they missed the boat? Let's jump in and start finding out. The Kona is based on the same platform as the i30, and that's most obvious here in the cabin because the cabin of the Kona is pretty much identical to the i30. It's got a little bit more personality, however. Depending on spec and colour, you can actually get these rings of the seats, the seat belts, and even the surrounds of the gear knob and the air vents in the body colour. And overall, it's a very pleasing and easy to use interior. Centerpiece of the Kona interior is this 7-inch infotainment system. It's a touchscreen, it's all very easy to use, much like everything else in the cabin, though it doesn't feature inbuilt satellite navigation no matter what model you go for. It does, however, have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone mirroring, which Hyundai says is more likely for Kona buyers to actually use. Like the i30 that the Kona is based on, the driving position is pretty much spot on. There's pretty good adjustment in the steering wheel for all shapes and sizes. The front seats are both electrically adjustable and include some nice under thigh angle adjustment. They're both heated and ventilated, which is a class exclusive, as well as the steering wheel being heated as well. And overall, it's a very easy to car to see out of. The rear window is quite large and over the shoulder visibility is pretty good as well. Storage in the cabin of the Kona is pretty good as well. You get these reasonable sized door bins over here. You get a nice big tray, in fact a dual level tray in front of the gear knob, which has wireless phone charging on this top spec Highlander. You get these cup holders here, which feature an inbuilt little tray, as well as a big center box and a nicely damped and pretty big glove box as well. Hyundai based the overall dimensions on the phenomenally selling Mazda CX-3. In fact, the Kona is just within 1 millimeter of the overall length of the CX-3. Thankfully, the back seat is definitely more commodious than the Mazda. For instance, legroom sitting behind my 6-foot self is just bearable. Footroom is much better, and headroom is much better than the CX-3. There's a few creature comforts in the back seat as well, like these nets on the back of the seats. There's a center armrest with 2 cup holders, and there's a bottle holder in the door. Disappointingly, there's no rear air vents, though no competitor actually offers that feature. Thankfully though, Hyundai knows how to package a car much better than Mazda, because when you open the boot of the Kona, and you'll notice it's quite low load height, the boot is actually around 30% bigger than a CX-3 at 361 litres. It's also got some pretty clever stuff as well. There's a nice boot net on upper spec models, a little storage tray up here, as well as a shopping bag hook over here. And you also get a false floor system, which means that you can increase the size. When you fold the seats down, they're completely flat, and you've got a 1,143 litre boot space. In Australia, you can get the Kona with 2 different drivetrains, and impressively, both drivetrains are offered on each specification of Kona. There's a 2-litre front-wheel drive combination with a 6-speed torque converter automatic. It makes 110 kilowatts of power and 180 newton meters of torque, so slightly less than its equivalent in the i30. If you go for that setup, you get a torsion beam rear suspension setup, and while it does ride mostly okay, the $3,500 upgrade to the 1.6 litre turbo with its 7-speed dual clutch automatic and its independent rear suspension is a noticeably more finessed product. The torsion beam setup rides mostly well around town. It's just at higher speeds, like on country roads like this, you notice that it is slightly less well damped than, say, a Mazda CX-3. All up though, the independent setup of the 1.6 turbo rides much better because not only is it slightly less firm, but it handles better. It also rides significantly better. It's definitely less upset by bumps in the road. It's definitely money well spent in our opinion. The engine setups themselves are quite respectable within this class. The 2-litre unit, while quite basic in its operation and reasonably thirsty, is a fine engine. It's a good companion to the 6-speed automatic that it's paired with. The 1.6 turbo that we have in this car is noticeably faster, however. It's definitely gruntier thanks to its low end torque, which is produced a lot lower in the rev range. It's also got nigh on 80 or 90 newton meters more torque, which is pretty significant in this class. And combine it with the Kona's relatively low curb weight, it's actually quite a sprightly thing to drive. Its 130 kilowatt power figure isn't quite as high as the 140 kilowatt that you get in the 1.6 turbo in the Nissan Juke. However, it is noticeably more than anything really else that you get in the small SUV segment. The Mazda CX-3's 109 kilowatt, as well as the Toyota CHR's 1.2 litre turbo, which has 85 kilowatts, feel noticeably slower compared to the Kona. One thing that the Kona has in common with cars like the CX-3 and the Toyota CHR is that the noise, vibration and harshness levels are definitely noticeably higher than their hatchback competitors. Hyundai Australia are understandably proud of their local tuning efforts. Every car that's delivered to Australia by Hyundai is actually locally tuned so that it handles our roads better than suspension tunes from, say, the US or Europe. The Kona is no different, and like the i30, the local tuning effort has been quite successful. The country roads outside Canberra that Hyundai chose to launch the Kona prove that despite some pretty bad quality roads, the Kona can eat it up pretty well. The ride quality is actually fairly good despite the larger 18-inch wheels of this Highlander, and overall dynamically the Kona is definitely one of the best cars in the small SUV class. Overall, the Kona is a very likeable car, and it compares well against the darlings of the small SUV segment, in particular the CX-3 and the CHR, with its engaging chassis and fun and reasonably quick 1.6 litre turbo petrol drivetrain. There is room to move, however, in terms of value equation and interior presentation, but overall the Kona remains a valuable addition to the small SUV segment and indeed the Hyundai lineup. We think that overall it's going to sell very well indeed.